Hello everybody and welcome back to The Lost Planeswalker. You're here with me, Jesse, the Lost Planeswalker, and today we're talking about Daretti, Rocketeer, Engineer. 4 red legendary creature Goblin Artificer. Daretti's power is equal to the greatest mana value among artifacts you control, and whenever Daretti enters or attacks, choose target artifact card in your graveyard. You may sack an artifact. If you do, return the chosen card to the battlefield. So Daretti here works just like a Goblin Welder, which, funny enough, is probably something he's doing in this set, welding this card together. But it's a very, very cool, repeatable effect that not only you get on cast, but every time he attacks. Now, there's a ton of really great things. So the way this deck is going to be designed is some really big cards you want to pull from your graveyard that are going to be creatures, artifacts, creature artifacts. Next, we're going to be looking at powerful ETB and discard abilities. And then lastly, we have some good stuff with some cool planeswalkers and some cards not to miss that'll really power up this deck. Diving into those large creatures, let's start by looking at those big hitters that create a lot of tokens. So we have Phyrexian Triniform, Triplicate Titan, and Wormcoil Engine. Each of these cards has a really cool ability to it. Phyrexian Triniform, when it dies, you create 3/3/3 colorless Phyrexian artifact creature tokens. Triplicate Titan has Flying, Vigilance, Trample, and creates a token with each Flying, Vigilance, and Trample. And then Wormcoil Engine also has Death Touch Lifelink, and when it dies, you create a 3/3 worm with Death Touch and a 3/3 worm with Lifelink. Not only does these creatures dying provide us with the artifact we need to get it back, but this is a loop we can perform over and over again in order to build up a board of tokens. So even if we can't do anything else but we have one of these, we can still be a pretty big threat. Next up, I want to look at some more cool, powerful creature effects with Bosch Iron Golem, Kuldotha Forge Master, and Threefold Thunderhulk. So Bosch Iron Golem is a legendary artifact creature golem with trample, and then for 3 and a red, sack an artifact. This deals damage equal to the sacked artifact's mana value to any target. We just talked about 2 9-mana cards and 1 6-mana card, and if we can sacrifice those artifacts, we're going to be able to deal a ton of damage straight to our opponent's faces if we want. Kuldotha Forge Master says tap, sack 3 artifacts, search your library for an artifact card, put on the battlefield, then shuffle. We're definitely going to have 3 artifacts on the board pretty much by the time we can cast this card, so being able to sack it and get whatever we want and put it straight on the battlefield is really great. And Threefold Thunderhulk, 7-mana artifact creature gnome. When it enters with 3++ counters on it. When it enters or attacks, create a number of 1/1 colorless gnome artifact creature tokens equal to its power, and 2, sack another artifact, put a +1/+1 counter on it. This is another creature we're going to want to play from our graveyard for free, and then get a ton of gnome artifact creature tokens out of it. So next, I want to talk about some cool cards that are going to help us create a ton of mana and some good value, with Combustible Gearhulk, Karn Legacy Reforged, and Suchi Caveguard. Combustible Gearhulk is a classic card that has first strike. When it enters, target opponent may have you draw 3 cards. If the player doesn't, you mill 3 cards. Then Combustible Gearhulk deals damage equal to that player, equal to the number of those cards. Karn Legacy Reforged, its power and toughness is equal to the greatest mana value among artifacts you control. And at the beginning of your upkeep, add a colorless for each artifact you control, and spend that mana to only cast artifact spells. And then Suchi Caveguard. This is kind of an interesting one that I think should definitely be included in this deck. It's an 8-mana Vigilance Ward creature, and then when it dies, add 8 generic mana until the end of your turn, and you don't lose that mana as steps and phases end. What I find super interesting about this is just the fact that it's a great way to ramp in red, which is super hard, and it's not ramping a little. 8 generic mana to do whatever you want with it is actually pretty great. And then lastly here, I want to talk about some really powerful artifact cards that you're going to want to pull from the bin, like Caged Sun, Coveted Jewel, and Ember Cleave. Caged Sun says, as it enters, choose color, red. Creatures of the chosen color get +1/+1, and whenever a land's ability causes you to add 1 or more mana of the chosen color, add an additional mana of that color. Coveted Jewel, when it enters, draw 3 cards, tap it to add 3 mana, and whenever 1 or more creatures and opponent controls attacks you that aren't blocked, that player draws 3 and gains control of Coveted Jewel. Untap it. Now for us here, we're going to want to pull this out, draw 3 cards, get 3 mana, and then sacrifice it right away in order to get some value. And then Ember Cleave, whether you're playing it from your hand or the graveyard and then equipping it later, this is great. It is flash. This spell costs 1 less to cast for each attacking creature you control. When it enters battlefield, attach a target creature you control. An equipped creature gets +1/+1 and has double strike and trample. Now let's head over and look at those ETB and discard effects, because that's going to be some of the best ways, just like the first couple cards, we're going to get great value. So we have Canotep Tomb Sentinel, Goblin Engineer, and Junk Diver. Canotep Tomb Sentinel is an artifact creature insect with vigilance and exile cannon. When this enters the battlefield from a graveyard, exile up to 1 target non-land permanent. Now typically you would unearth this card, but with Daretti, we may return it to the battlefield, which is basically having it enter from the graveyard, which is exactly what we're trying to do. So every time we bring this out, we can just exile something. Goblin Engineer says when it enters, you may search your library for an artifact card, put it in your graveyard, then shuffle, and then red and tap, sack an artifact, return target artifact card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. This is basically just an entomb, but in red, and letting us put stuff into our bin to get out with Daretti. And then Junk Diver, artifact creature bird with flying. When it dies, return another target artifact card from your graveyard to your hand. There's some things we're gonna want to cast from our hand specifically, so this is gonna be a great card to get. Talking about some powerful sacrifice effects, we have Crime Novelist, Feldon of the Third Path, and Scrap Welder. So Crime Novelist says whenever you sack an artifact, you may put a +1/+1 counter on it and gain a mana. We have a lot of free effects that are gonna help us sack things, so this is great. Feldon of the Third Path, 2 and a red tap. Create a token that's a copy of target creature card in your graveyard, except it's an artifact in addition to its other types. It gains haste at the beginning of the next end step, sacrifice it. So Feldon here I think is actually really neat because he does 2 things that are really fun. First, he creates a copy of a creature, so it's going to gain all effects, including the mana value of that creature that some of our cards care about. And then secondly, we have another sacrifice effect, which a lot of cards in our deck care about, and it'll also just reach into our graveyard specifically, which we're trying to fill up. And then Scrap Welder, creature, Goblin Artificer, tap it, sack an artifact with mana value X, return target artifact card with mana value X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. It gains haste until end of turn. A great way to get some of our big creatures out by sacking our other big creatures to then continue that loop. Now we're going to look at some cards that are going to help us discard to then draw. So we have Big Score, Grab the Prize, and Seize the Spoils. And all these cards do a very similar thing. The more you pay into them, the more they do. So Big Score has you draw 2 cards and create 2 treasures. Seize the Spoils has you draw 2 cards and create 1 treasure. And Grab the Prize is an upgraded version of Thrill of Possibility that has you draw 2 cards, and if the discarded card wasn't a land, this deals 2 damage to each opponent. So it was added here because I think it's just slightly better. And then lastly, we have powerful value creatures with Mishra, Excavation Prodigy, Scrap Trawler, and Sneak Attack. Mishra here has haste. We can tap it for 1 to discard a card, then draw a card. And whenever we discard 1 or more artifacts, we add 2 red mana, which is really great. Scrap Trawler here also says whenever another artifact is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, return it to your hand. Target artifact card with mana value less than that. And then Sneak Attack is going to help us put those big creatures onto the battlefield. Let them attack, let them die, let us get all the benefits of doing so. Some of the other ETB and discard cards here are Cathartic Reunion, Curse Mirror, Demand Answers, Faithless Looting, Flame Shadow Conjuring, Gamble, Icar Wellspring, Jaxus the Troublemaker, Michael's 10th Wellspring, Prize Statue, Reckless Fireweaver, Sculpting Steel, Servo Schematic, Solemn Simulacrum, Trasher Treasure, and Unexpected Windfall. Moving into those good stuff cards, like I mentioned, we're going to look at some really cool Planeswalkers, notably the commander of this deck, Daretti, Scrap Savant, and Ugin the Ineffable. So Daretti Scrap Savant is just a great artifact card. It already did this, so if you've played this before, you know this Daretti deck is going to play somewhat similar. But +2, discard up to 2 cards, then draw that many cards. -2, sack an artifact. If you do, return target artifact card from your graveyard to the battlefield. And -10, you get an emblem with whenever an artifact is put into your graveyard from the battlefield, return that card to the battlefield at the beginning of the next end step. There's probably some different combos you could have performed with that Planeswalker version of Daretti, but I think this new one is going to be really fun as well. And Ugin the Ineffable, 6 generic, legendary Planeswalker Ugin, colorless spells you cast toss 2 less to cast, which we notably have a fair number of. +1, exile the top card of your library face down. You may look at it, create a 2/2 colorless spirit creature token. When that token leaves the battlefield, put the exiled card into your hand, and then -3, destroy target permanent that's 1 or more colors. Removal on a stick gets us some cards into hand and discounts our spells, so it's definitely worth playing. The other good stuff cards that I don't want you to miss are Molten Duplication, Scrap Mastery, and Treasonous Ogre. So Molten Duplication is a sorcery that says create a token that's a copy of target artifact or creature you control, except it's an artifact in addition to its other types. It gains haste at the end of your turn, sack it at the beginning of the next end step. This is just a great finisher type card that'll allow us to copy some of our biggest creatures, get some additional value from them, or just copy one of our best artifacts and get a second one of it. Scrap Mastery, 3 red sorcery. Each player exiles all artifact cards from their graveyard, then sacrifices all artifacts they control, then puts all cards exiled this way onto the battlefield. This will basically take our entire graveyard, put it onto the battlefield, and is a really cool way to just be able to almost Rise of the Dark Realms our entire deck, because almost all of our creatures that are really important are artifacts also. So a very, very cool card. And then Treasonous Ogre, 3 in a red, creature ogre shaman with Dethrone, and you may pay 3 life, you add a red mana to your mana pool. This is going to be a great way if we want to ramp super early on. Throw this on the battlefield, we're going to take a ton of damage, but we can get things out there very quickly. The other powerful good stuff cards are Abrade, Anger, Arcane Signet, Artist Talent, Audacious Reshapers, Blasphemous Act, Canotep, Spider, Chaos Warp, Curse of Opulence, Helm of the Host, Lightning Bolt, Mystic Forge, Ornithopter of Paradise, Ruby Medallion, Soul Ring, Swiftfoot Boots, 3 in Dynamo, and Untimely Malfunction. Now, I did bail out the land base in this deck, and there's a pretty substantial sideboard and maybe board. So if you enjoyed this deck and you thought, oh, you need more power, come check this out. I took out these cards for one reason or another, whether I thought they were too strong and I was trying to build this around a more casual effect. Come and check out the sideboard maybe board. It is filled with a lot of really expensive cards that I took out for price or power level, and I would be happy if you were to look through these and add these into your deck if you want to play a different strategy than the one I provide. But that is it. Thank you so much for watching. Comment down below on what cards you think I should add or cut from Daretti. Did you like this deck? Let me know in the comments down below. I'm very excited that this is the first Aetherdrift commander we've received, and I think it is very powerful, so I'm hoping the rest of the cards bring a certain or same level of fun and interest to commander deck design. If you would like to help me out in another way, if you would please leave a like, share this video with a friend, and subscribe. That would mean the world to me, so thank you, thank you, thank you. If you want to check out my Patreon as well, feel free. If you enjoy the videos I do, it would mean a lot. So today's Scryfall card of the day is Thraben Exorcism. Chandra Teferi and Arlen sought clues to the Moonsilver Key's whereabouts, while Kaya dispatched the spirits obstructing their path. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, I'll see you later, Planeswalker.